Welcome back, Camden Catholic and Honors. Getting a little choked up. This is our last flip of the year. So, got my timer on, and we're going to be using this flip to wrap up World War I and kind of get to the end of our content, right? So, let's get after it, though. We finished up in class talking about how do you win a war that's resulted in a stalemate, and it is a war of attrition. Well, each side's going to set up the blockades, like we talked about in class, and a blockade is, of course, using ships from carrying goods in and out of countries, right? The British are going to use their blockades set up their blockades using dreadnoughts. The Germans are going to use theirs setting up submarine blockades. Now, really, really quickly, like I told you in class, underneath this you should have like an angry face and then the phrase, unrestricted submarine warfare. Now, I didn't get a chance to say this in every class, but what unrestricted submarine warfare is when the Germans would actually sink any passing vessel. It did not matter if it was civilian. It didn't matter if it was completely useless for war. They would just sink it regardless, right? And that's going to lead to a lot of animosity from countries like the United States of America. We got very, very upset about this unrestricted submarine warfare because we felt it was wrong and very, very, very crass and messed up. Now, also, widespread use of propaganda in World War I, which is the spreading of ideas to promote a cause. Propaganda is used to encourage men to fight and join their army, encourage higher morale on the home front. It also promoted the ideas of rationing, which is citizens living scarcely so that soldiers can have more. So, it also heavily promotes nationalism, right? So, for example, be patriotic, sign your country's pledge to save food. This is propaganda from World War I. This is my favorite piece of World War I propaganda. Destroy this mad brute. Enlist in the American Army. Because the really cool thing is like King Kong was a very popular film during this era. So you've got Germany as the Kaiser, like Germany as King Kong. See militarism there on his top of his helmet. He's got the Kaiser's mustache. He's going to attack them with their culture, right? And of course this, who is that? It's the Statue of Liberty. They're coming to take our liberty, right? So very, very, very cool. I love that. I want that poster somewhere in here. So the other one, this is a good one as well, Dig for Victory. So victory gardens were these things promoted by some propaganda. Go ahead and start jotting this down when I finish that up. Victory gardens were like gardens at schools or at homes where American citizens would actually garden vegetables and then send them to the war effort, also used to help promote like rationing of foods on the home front. So they would actually grow their own food so they could use it at home as well. So what these blockades are going to lead to, though, is things like food shortages, failures in battle, and what that's going to cause is a lot of low morale in these different countries, especially in Germany. Now, morale, of course, is a group's feelings towards the war, and morale is going to collapse for civilians and armies. You could tell low morale was on the way, especially when Germany was sending like 15-year-old recruits to the front lines. England was almost bankrupt. They were melting down pots and pans to try and make bullets out of at one point. The stalemate, food shortages, hunger strikes. Write that down somewhere. Hunger strikes were happening in Germany. People were like rebelling against the current government. They actually got so mad that they banished the Kaiser from Germany. He actually had to run away to the Netherlands. And then like this thing called the Weimar Republic is going to step up. And it's mainly staffed by all these really, really old curmudgeon military officers. One of the big ones' name was Hindenburg. Remember when we talked about the Hindenburg today? So it was that blimp was named after him. So England's almost bankrupt, stalemate, food shortages, and failures in battle leading to citizens hating the war on both sides, right? So food shortages and low morale are going to lead to the communist revolution in Russia in 1917. So write this down somewhere nearby. Russia drops out of the war in 1917. They refuse to keep fighting in it due to their communist revolution. Now, with Russia out of the picture, Germany can now take all of its forces and focus them on the Western Front. So, now their original idea, actually, hold on, I'll tell you that in a minute. But looking at this right here, which is really, really messed up, do we wonder why the Russian Empire dropped out of the war? This right here is military deaths of all the Entente powers. France, heavily abused by this war. The British, a lot of losses. Italy. But Russia, 1 out of every 3 men that died for the Entente were Russian. So that's a huge, huge, huge amount. But let's keep going. Now, anyway, so the U.S. is going to finally enter this war for a couple of different reasons. One of them has to do with that unrestricted submarine warfare that we talked about. Because Woodrow Wilson, who was the U.S. president at the time, a New Jersey guy, well, he actually isn't from New Jersey, but he was a senator from New Jersey. You guys know him, Woodrow Wilson High School, right? So, Woodrow Wilson is the U.S. president. He is going to accost and denounce Germany after they sank a cruise ship known as the Lusitania, right? The Lusitania had 1,200 people aboard, killed 1,200 people when it sank. 128 of those people were Americans. Now, anyway, so what the United States is going to do is address the Germans, and they're going to say, you are not allowed to use this unrestricted submarine warfare anymore. It's resulting in the death of civilians. So the Germans decide to back off for a little while. So write down like under here somewhere, the Germans backed off on unrestricted submarine warfare for a little while. They actually kicked it back up again in like 1917, leading to the United States entering the war. So the passenger boat was also possibly, though, delivering military supplies to the Allies. So like Germany was wrong for killing a cruise ship, but we were also kind of wrong as a country for probably trying to smuggle military weapons and aid to the Entente powers on a cruise ship. So anyway, but this, of course, is the New York Times article when the Lusitania was sunk by the submarines, probably 1,260 dead, twice torpedoed off the Irish coast, sunk in 15 minutes. So this is a picture of the Lusitania being sunk as well. And this, of course, is Woodrow Wilson when he unrestricted submarine warfare. And then this note, which a lot of people believe it was a fake, that the British actually created it on their own, is known as the Zimmermann telegram. So the Zimmermann telegram, apparently written by Arthur Zimmermann, the German ambassador, sent a message to Mexico telling them to attack the United States and reconquer the land in the United States that they had lost and had so unjustly stripped from them by the Americans after the Mexican-American War. So Germany apparently in the telegram promised that they were actually going to give Mexico guns, tanks, warfare materials to reconquer the United States. Now, apparently, this telegram was intercepted by the British, and they ran up to us and told us about it. And so, needless to say, the United States, this, of course, is the original Zimmermann telegram. That right there is one of the political cartoons used to depict it. And then right here, the paths to victory. So after the Zimmermann telegram, 2 million American soldiers were flooded into the United States, right? Now, right before all that happened, there was this thing called the October Offensive, right? When the Germans were like, all right, we're going to take everything we got left, we're going to throw it at the Western Front, we're going to try to punch a hole in it and then knock France out really quick, right? They ended up getting stalled out, though, because of that low morale, because of low supplies and a lot of other things. And then incoming by 1918 is 2 million American soldiers on the front lines in Europe fighting like that. Revolts in Germany also led to a very, very weakened state of their army, military, and as well as their ruling class. And with help from American forces, the Allies are going to push the Central Powers all the way back through France, and the Central Powers were going to call for an armistice, which is an end to fighting, and it was signed. Oh, the armistice was signed on November 11th, 1918 at 11 a.m. The best way to remember the armistice being signed, the end of fighting, is on the 11th day of the 11th month and the 11th hour of 1918, World War I ended. So the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour. Would it not be cool if it also happened at 11 a.m.? Make a wish, right? So this, of course, is them signing the armistice, agreeing to stop the fighting. And then armistice signed, Germany surrenders, right? So, occurred at 5 p.m. Paris time, hostilities ceased at 11 a.m. So, following this, there's going to be a lot of aftermath kind of things. Number one, millions of soldiers and civilians are dead. Even more of them are wounded. Also, some of the very, very first noticed signs of post-traumatic stress disorder were occurring in the aftermath of World War I. They called it shell shock at the time, though, because they didn't really quite understand it. And they called it shell shock due to the artillery strikes. A lot of people would react to loud bangs and loud noises. So, also, resulting in 1923, soon after World War I, there was a pandemic, which a pandemic is an infection over a very large area, crossing usually country lines, of a flu. And the flu was called the Spanish flu. Killed over 20 million people worldwide. Now, also, the U.S., France, and Britain are going to be called the Big Three following World War I because they were the Big Three winning powers. Some of you are like, well, what about Russia? They were in the Entente. This is true. However, remember, they had dropped out in 1917 due to their communist revolution. So they weren't considered a part of the Big Three. And they figured out who the Big Three was at this thing called the Paris Peace Conference. This right here is the meeting of the Paris Peace Conference. So right here you have Woodrow Wilson, the man, the myth, the legend. Then you got George Clemenceau, who looks vaguely like the Lorax, if you ask me. And then you've also got Lloyd George. Well, no, that's the Italian prime minister. I can never remember his name. Hold on. Anyway, Italian prime minister, World War I. His name was, Emmanuel Orlando, all right? So you've got Orlando right there. And you got Lloyd George. Not to be confused with Boy George, the singer from the 80s. Very different people, all right? So Lloyd George right here being the Prime Minister of England. And all this meeting was held at this thing called the Paris Peace Conference. The Paris Peace Conference is when Woodrow Wilson refused to sign this new treaty called the Treaty of Versailles because he thought it was very, very unfair and that it would lead to another war. So instead, he suggested his thing called the 14 points, okay? What I need you to write next to Versailles right here is because, put it in parentheses real quick, the Treaty of Versailles was forcing the blame onto Germany, all right? They were saying that the Germans had to repay a lot of different stuff and all kinds of other things. We'll get to that in a minute, though. But what your 14 points do, I need you to add something to this. Don't let me forget, all right? They're going to call for fair trade over the seas, right? Trying to create non-economic competitive modalities, right? They're going to call for no more unrestricted submarine warfare. It was then outlawed in the 14 points. It also called for the creating of a League of Nations. You now call the League of Nations the United Nations because the League of Nations is a failed attempt at this. However, it called for a League of Nations, and it called for a lot of peaceful qualities country to country. However, the European powers are going to kick the 14 points aside, and it would never be ratified at the Paris Peace Conference. So Woodrow Wilson's 14 points never actually went through because they wanted to blame the Central Powers for the war. So instead, they brought in the Treaty of Versailles, which is what it was known as. So what's going to happen in the Treaty of Versailles is, first and foremost, Austria-Hungary is going to be broken all up, right? They're going to be broken up into several new countries, including Austria, Hungary, Yugoslavia is what it was going to be called then, Czechoslovakia at the time, Croatia, and several other countries that actually, when you really think about it, they started the whole thing when they were trying to taking over Bosnia, right, when the Serbians originally had gotten mad. Now, the Treaty of Versailles, though, as a part of that, blamed Germany for the war. There was actually a clause inside the Treaty of Versailles called the War Guilt Clause, where Germany had to sign that part of the document saying, we accept full blame for the war. That is so messed up. Now, anyway, so the Treaty of Versailles is going to blame Germany completely for the war, forcing them to pay these reparations and these war costs as well. So it was equal to about $2.7 trillion today. And funny enough, Germany actually just finished paying these reparations off in November of 2011. They wrote the United States our last check for the reparations of World War I. So they also stripped a lot of land from Germany, reduced their army size to barely 50%, took away their freestanding navy completely, and created this demilitarized buffer zone known as the Rhineland towards the eastern part of France. That included those old territories, Alsace and Lorraine, that they actually had gotten from the Franco-Prussian War. So the League of Nations is also going to be created on the heels of this, which is a co-op of over 40 different nations. And guess who, a part of this, write it down somewhere, the United States refused to sign any part of the Treaty of Versailles. It was never ratified in our country. We never actually agreed to it. So the League of Nations was going to be created. It was the one part of the 14 points that they actually brought into the Treaty of Versailles. It was a co-op of over 40 different countries made to discuss and prevent further war. Now, the problem, though, is this right here. This is actually them trying to force Germany. This is a political cartoon of Italy, France, and Britain forcing Germany to sign that war guilt clause, right? Now, the sad part about it is, looking at this entire thing, this is just going to lead to yet another war. So America refused to be involved in this new league. We did not join the League of Nations. We did not sign the Treaty of Versailles because we thought that it was ridiculous that poor Germany was being taken advantage of. So, and this is a political cartoon discussing how the idea of Woodrow Wilson's original 14 points was twisted to basically muzzling the dog of war, right? The idea that war will happen again because of how we're handling the end of World War I. And what that's going to cause is a terrible economy in Germany and lead to a lot of people rising up like Adolf Hitler, right? So amongst a multitude of other reasons. But, guys, that's it. That's Western Civ in Mr. Terry's class, and we're done and done. So, amazingly proud of all of you guys. I've had a fantastic year with every one of you. I really, really hope to see you guys around as much as possible. And, yeah, so, to say the least, I am truly proud. So, really, really enjoyed it. Whack 'em, yeah. And that's it. So, I hope you all having a very, very good, enjoying rest of your weekend. Go ahead and start finishing up those 2 new study guides. Those are due Tuesday, along with this flip. Have a great evening, guys. I'll see y'all then.